I have a love for these people, and hopefully now Congress will be able to help them and do it properly. We have no choice. We have to be able to do something, and I think it's going to work out very well. And long term, it's going to be the right solution.
If we are to further our goal of strengthening the constitutional order and the rule of law in America, the Department of Justice cannot defend this overreach.
You should be building bridges of opportunity, not walls of discrimination.
My challenge to the president is that you've talked very glowingly about these kids. Help us. Help us in the House. Help us in the Senate. I think you're a good man. Get involved personally.
DACA, the so-called Dreamers, that program coming to an end, announced by the Attorney General today, the president saying that Congress now has to deal with it. Congress is dealing with a lot. As you look at the calendar, you can see by the end of September, you have the government essentially running out of money. That's the funding deadline. You have the debt ceiling deadline on the 29th. You can see the Menendez trial. That's important for Senate numbers. Starts just this Wednesday. But you have lawmakers have until the end, the spending bill, risk government shutdown of September. They have to reauthorize the National Flood Insurance Program. That's already $25 billion in debt. They have to renew the Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, by the end of the month. It also has to reauthorize the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, at the end of the month. And the special budget rules, the reconciliation that allowed not a 60 vote, but a 51 vote for Obamacare repeal and replace. Well, that comes to an end at the end of the month, too. And if they want to do that, they need to hurry up. Let's bring in our panel and deal with all this. Charles Hurd, opinion editor for the Washington Times. Anna Palmer, senior Washington correspondent for Politico. And Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review. Jonah, let me start with you about DACA, the decision the president made, the defense of it, and what the critics are saying about it today.
Sure. I think on the sort of the constitutional or civic merits, President Trump made exactly the right decision. That I don't think even the Obama administration said this was supposed to be a temporary program. The Title D in DACA is deferred. It was always supposed to be followed up by real legislation. Presidents aren't supposed to make law. And I think it's funny how so many liberals who've been screaming about how Donald Trump violates constitutional norms are now screaming that he's actually reverting to constitutional norms by saying, no, the Congress is the body of government that writes laws. On the other hand, politically, I think that this is a hot mess. I think that Donald Trump is setting up Congress for potentially disastrous failure. And at the same time, he wants to punt this so he doesn't have to make this very hard decision that puts him either on the wrong side of his base or the wrong side of everybody else. And if it's not at all clear to me that Ryan and McConnell can get anything passed and put on Trump's desk unless he takes a side and actually fights for some legislation.
Anna.
Yeah, I think the big question is going to be, where does the president come out? Today he had his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, do the announcement. He has not kind of publicly said what is a bill that he could sign. And you're up there on Capitol Hill today, that every lawmaker that's coming in back from this August recess, there's no strategy on this on Capitol Hill from Republicans about how they're going to be able to deal with this, even though everyone is saying for the most part that they'd like to get some kind of immigration package that includes DACA and some of the other border wall funding, other things that maybe would be some red meat to the Trump base.
All right, here's, Charlie, how Rush Limbaugh characterized this today on his radio show.
What Trump did today via Sessions, it's almost along the same lines as pulling out of the Paris Accords. This is just, it's rocked them. They didn't think it would ever happen. Trump is not this callous. Trump is not this cold-hearted. But Trump knows his base. And he knows the impact all of this has had on the American economy and American jobs. And he's following through on one of his most predominant campaign commitments.
Well, characterize this. Is this a base play, or is this because of the lawsuits that they truly believe that they couldn't uphold it or defend it in court?
I think it's probably most certainly both of them. And of course, Jonah is exactly right. It kind of rolls a grenade with the pin pulled into Congress, because of course it is going to be very difficult for Congress to do something about this. But that just goes to show, I mean, this is a very low bar that we're asking of them. It's a very, it's amazing to sit here and listen to people on both sides of the aisle come out suddenly, now that Donald Trump has done this, and say, oh, no, this program is so good, we've got to do something about it, we want to help these people. And you're looking at them like, well, where have you been for the past 10 years? And you know, it's important to remember that and especially among Democrats, you had Barack Obama saying that this was a cruel move. You have Chuck Schumer talking today about how this is going to tear families apart. Well, all of these people ran everything in this town in 2008 after President Obama got elected, and they didn't do a thing about this. And then, of course, Republicans are now in control, and Republicans have come out today talking about how important it is to do something about this. My goodness, we all agree on this, then do something about it. Yeah. And it really does underscore, I think, that Donald Trump isn't the one that did something wrong today. It's Congress that is continuing to do things, mess things up.
Jonah, you look at the calendar. As of tomorrow, there are 11 legislative days for them to get all of this through. I mean, it's almost unheard of.
Yeah, I honestly don't see how they can get all of it done. I think you're going to have some stuff just sort of crammed together, maybe Harvey and what looks like Irma relief tied together with a debt ceiling, which I think is actually perfectly defensible for the reasons that Mnuchin said. But the idea that they're going to get Congress does not do a very good job of making good legislation when it has a lot of time on its hands. This is like a bad episode of MacGyver where they've got to get the bomb defused and they're still 10 miles away from the bomb and they only got 5 minutes to get there.
I know, but he always pulls it out in the end.
Yeah, but the Republican Party doesn't. So I don't know how this is going to play itself out without something falling by the wayside.
And likely some of these things are going to get punted like they usually do to some later date, and we are likely looking again at a continuing resolution for the funding of the government.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what they're talking about is trying to find some kind of package where you could have raise the debt ceiling funding for the next several months, maybe into December, and then you could have another possible showdown on Capitol Hill again. I think, as Jonah said, Congress rarely acts unless it has to. That has been kind of the way that it's been working and operating for the last several years. So as much talk as we're talking about DACA right now and Dreamers, I wouldn't expect anything to get done until right at that 6-month period where it's kind of you either have to vote on something or not. They just don't operate in a way that they kind of do things when they aren't forced to by the calendar.
Meantime, they're setting up the table, Charlie, for tax reform down the road before the end of the year, they hope. But is it possible to shoot the gap and get some kind of immigration thing done this cycle?
Well, I think it'll certainly be tough, but there's something about the jet fumes around here when they get up hard against an opportunity to go home, and they start thinking about what those town halls are going to be like when they get home, and they get to worrying about their own careers, and then of course you have on top of that this opportunity to spend $8, $10, $12 billion on hurricane relief. Usually it's not pretty what they end up putting together, but usually they wind up putting something together.
We'll see where the deficit hawks stand on all of this this week. Busy time in September. Charlie, Anna, Jonah, thank you.